40% more? That can't be right. I blinked at my screen, the numbers refusing to change no matter how many times I refreshed the page. The compensation spreadsheet that Kyle from HR had accidentally shared with the entire finance department instead of just the leadership team glowed on my monitor, each row more devastating than the last. Mason Reeves, 2 years at the company. Base salary, $137,000. Vanessa Lynn, 14 months at the company. Base salary, $134,500. Tristan Adler, 8 months at the company. Base salary, $142,000. All of them trained by me. All of them making almost 40% more than my $98,750 salary after 9 years of building this company's entire financial infrastructure from nothing. The office sounds faded around me. The clicking keyboards, murmured conversations, the hum of the ventilation system that always ran too cold. I scrolled through the document again, my chest tightening when I found my name buried on page 3. Eleanor Avery, 9 years at the company. Base salary, $98,750. 9 years. Countless 60-hour weeks solving impossible equations, finding errors nobody else could see, creating compliance protocols that saved the company millions, training every single person who now earned dramatically more than me. I glanced across the open office at Mason, laughing at something on his screen, probably another cryptocurrency meme. Mason, who still asked me how to properly reconcile accounts payable despite 2 years on the job. Mason, who earned nearly $40,000 more than me. The email recall notice from Kyle came 3 minutes later, but it was too late. I had already downloaded the spreadsheet and saved it to my personal drive. I closed my laptop and walked directly to Daniel Hammond's office, my manager for the past 6 years. I didn't schedule a meeting, didn't send a message, just knocked twice, and entered when he looked up from his desk. Eleanor? Something urgent? He had the audacity to look annoyed at the interruption. I placed my laptop in front of him, opened to the spreadsheet. I need to understand this. My voice sounded strange, controlled yet hollow. Daniel's eyes flicked to the screen, then back to me. The slight widening of his pupils told me everything. He knew exactly what I'd found. He closed my laptop and leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. Eleanor, you know I can't discuss other employees' compensation. I'm not asking about their compensation. I'm asking about mine. I reopened the laptop. 9 years, Daniel. 9 years building every financial system this company relies on. I trained all of these people who now make 40% more than me. How is that possible? He sighed. That particular sigh manager's perfect to make you feel like you're being unreasonable. The market has changed significantly since you were hired, Eleanor. It's company policy for new market entrants. Your compensation was set in a different economy. So adjust it. It's not that simple. There are bans, structures, policies. He shrugged, actually shrugged at me. Take it or leave it. My hands were trembling, but not from fear. From something else entirely. I'd like to request a formal compensation review. I kept my voice level. I can submit the request, but frankly, it will be denied. We just completed annual reviews last quarter. You received your standard 3% increase. He glanced at his watch. Was there anything else? That night, I didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't call my sister Meredith to vent my frustration. Instead, I opened my laptop at my kitchen table and began to write. I'm Ellie, by the way. Eleanor Avery, 34 years old. The kind of person who alphabetizes her spice rack and color codes her closet. The kind of person who's always been told she's detail-oriented and thorough. Corporate code for, we'll pile work on you until you break because you're too responsible to let things fail. Let me pause for a moment. Before I go any further, could you please take a few seconds to tell me in the comments where you are watching from? I want to know my story reached you, wherever you are. And if you've ever felt undervalued, maybe drop a heart or something. Because what I'm about to tell you changed everything for me. And maybe it will for you too. So there I was, sitting at my kitchen table with a glass of grocery store Cabernet, creating the most important document of my career. I started with a simple timeline of my 9 years at the company. 2014, hired as financial analyst. Built the first automated reporting system that eliminated 30 hours of manual work weekly. 2015, promoted to senior analyst. Restructured the accounts receivable process, reducing outstanding collections by 42%. 2016, created tax compliance framework that passed federal audit with zero findings. First, clean audit in company history. I documented everything. Every crisis I'd averted, every dollar I'd saved, every system I'd built, every person I'd trained who now earned more than me. I worked through the night, fueled by a cold clarity I'd never experienced before. By dawn, I had created a 43-page analysis titled The Cost of Institutional Memory, a comprehensive breakdown of my value to the company. On the final page, I calculated the exact dollar amount I had saved the company in the previous year alone, $267,459. Compared against the adjustment I should have received to bring my salary to market rate, $39,500. The math wasn't complicated. I printed the document and had it professionally bound at a 24-hour copy shop. Then I went home, showered, and dressed in my most expensive outfit, a charcoal pencil, skirt, and cream blouse I'd bought myself after my last promotion 3 years ago. When I arrived at the office, I headed straight for CEO Garrett Wilson's office. His assistant Tara wasn't at her desk yet. It was only 7:15 a.m., so I slipped into his empty office and placed 3 items in the center of his desk. My resignation letter, an offer letter from a competing firm that had been courting me for months, offering $145,000 plus benefits, my leather-bound analysis. Then I went to my desk and began to work as though it were any other day. By 9:30, my phone rang. Garrett's extension. "Eleanor, could you come to my office, please?" His voice was tight. I took my time gathering my notebook and pen, walked deliberately across the office floor where people were already whispering. Word had gotten out about the spreadsheet. I felt their eyes on me but kept my gaze forward. When I entered Garrett's office, I found not just him, but Daniel, Kyle from HR, and Vanessa Chen, the COO. My analysis sat open on Garrett's desk. "Close the door, please, Eleanor," Garrett said. At 57, he had the practiced calm of someone who had never been told no. I remained standing, even when Garrett gestured to the chair. "We've reviewed your document," he began, tapping the leather cover. "I have to say, it's quite thorough." "Thank you." I kept my voice neutral. "There seems to be a misunderstanding about compensation that we should address," Kyle, from HR, interjected, sweating slightly at his hairline. "No misunderstanding," I replied. "I've worked here 9 years. I've trained 5 people who now earn significantly more than me. When I raised the issue, I was told it was company policy. I'm simply making a business decision based on the information provided." Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "Eleanor, if you had given us time to review your request..." "I did. For 9 years." I turned to face Garrett directly. The final section of my analysis includes a comprehensive knowledge transfer plan. Every process, contact, workaround, and system vulnerability that exists exclusively in my head, organized by department impact. You'll find it quite detailed. Vanessa Chen, who had remained silent, finally spoke. "You've clearly put significant thought into this, Eleanor." "I have." "What would it take for you to reconsider your resignation?" Garrett asked, leaning forward. I had anticipated this question. My market value is clearly established by both your own compensation structure and my competing offer. But this isn't just about money. It's about 9 years of being undervalued despite demonstrable contributions to this company's success. I paused, letting the silence grow uncomfortable. I'd need my salary adjusted to $150,000, retroactive compensation for the past year's disparity as a bonus, and a formal review of compensation practices across the company to address similar inequities. Kyle actually gasped. Daniel looked at his shoes. Garrett studied me for a long moment. "You realize what you're asking is highly unusual. So is building your entire financial infrastructure and training my own replacements at a 40% discount for 9 years. The clock on Garrett's wall ticked loudly in the silence that followed. Outside the glass walls of his office, I could see people pretending not to watch. Finally, Garrett nodded. "Give us 24 hours to prepare a formal response." I collected my notebook. "My resignation is effective in 2 weeks. The knowledge transfer plan I've outlined requires 60 days minimum. You have 24 hours to decide whether that gap is worth addressing." As I turned to leave, Vanessa spoke again. "Eleanor, just out of curiosity, who made you the competing offer?" I paused at the door. "Horizon Financial Solutions. They're led by Catherine Walsh." I let that hang in the air. Catherine Walsh, who had famously left this very company 5 years ago after experiencing the same treatment I had. Catherine Walsh, who had since built a competitor that had been stealing our clients for the past 2 years. The look on their faces told me they finally understood what they were about to lose. I walked back to my desk, heart pounding but steps steady. I could feel the shift in power vibrating through the air around me. For the first time in 9 years, I wasn't just Eleanor, the reliable financial architect. I was Eleanor, the force to be reckoned with. And they knew it. As I sat down at my desk, my phone lit up with a text from Catherine. "Did you do it?" I typed back a single word. "Yes." Her reply came instantly. "Their loss. Our gain. Dinner tonight to celebrate?" I smiled as I set my phone down. The real victory wasn't just standing up for myself after 9 years of undervaluation. It was what was coming next. Because the secret I hadn't included in my analysis was the most valuable of all. I set my phone down and looked around the office that had been my second home for nearly a decade. The faint smell of burnt coffee from the break room. The uneven hum of the air conditioning. The view of the city skyline I'd watched grow with new buildings year after year. All so familiar yet suddenly different. My computer pinged with an incoming message. It was from Jordan in accounts receivable. "What's happening? Everyone's saying you quit?" News travels fast in an office designed for eavesdropping. I minimized the message without responding and instead pulled up the file I'd been working on for months. Not my analysis, something else entirely. When I said I'd documented everything in those 9 years, I meant everything. The first irregular transaction had caught my eye 18 months earlier. A vendor payment that didn't match any approved purchase order. Small enough to fly under the radar, $13,875 to a consulting firm I'd never heard of. I flagged it to Daniel, who dismissed it as pre-approved by executive leadership. The same response I got when I flagged the next one. And the next. After the third dismissal, I started keeping a separate log. Transactions with no supporting documentation. Vendors with post office box addresses and no websites. Payments that occurred like clockwork each quarter, growing slightly each time. By month 6 of my secret accounting, the pattern was unmistakable. Someone was siphoning company funds through fake vendor accounts. The amounts were calculated precisely to avoid triggering audit thresholds, starting small and growing just enough each quarter to establish a pattern that wouldn't raise flags if normalized against our growing revenue. It was elegant, really. A financial ghost operation that had diverted over $2.7 million in the past 3 years. This was the document Catherine really wanted. This was why she'd been courting me for months, offering a salary that actually reflected my worth. Because she suspected what I'd confirmed. Our company's pristine financial image was built on carefully constructed fraud. My desk phone rang, startling me. Daniel's extension. "Eleanor, can you come to the conference room? We'd like to continue our conversation." 3 hours. They'd only needed 3 hours, not 24. "I'll be right there." When I entered the Pine Room, our company named conference rooms after trees, how original, I found Garrett, Daniel, Vanessa, and now Thomas Whitaker, our chief legal counsel. Interesting addition. "Please, sit." Garrett gestured to the empty chair across from him. He looked like he hadn't slept, though it was barely afternoon. I sat, placing my notebook and pen precisely in front of me. "We've reviewed your requests," Garrett began, "and we're prepared to offer you a revised compensation package." Thomas slid a document across the table. I took my time reading it, aware of 4 sets of eyes watching me. Salary adjustment to $155,000, effective immediately. a retention bonus of $45,000, a new title, Senior Director of Financial Operations, a seat on the Executive Leadership Committee, everything I'd asked for and more. The desperate counterattack of people who suddenly realized exactly how vulnerable they were. I closed the document and looked up. This is acceptable. Thank you. The visible relief that washed over Daniel's face was almost comical. Wonderful. Garrett smiled tightly. Thomas will work with HR to expedite the paperwork. We're very pleased we could resolve this matter internally. I nodded, gathering my things to leave, when Thomas cleared his throat. Just one additional matter, Eleanor. As part of this new arrangement, we've prepared a standard confidentiality agreement regarding company compensation structures and any irregularities you may have observed during your tenure. And there it was. I turned to Thomas, my expression neutral. Irregularities? Thomas maintained his practiced lawyer poker face. Standard language for executive agreements. Nothing of concern. I let the silence hang for 3 full seconds before responding. I'll need to review that language carefully before signing. Would you mind emailing it to me? Of course, Thomas nodded, though a muscle in his jaw twitched. I stood to leave but paused at the door. One more thing. I'd like written confirmation that the compensation review for other potentially affected employees will begin within 30 days, as we discussed. Vanessa and Garrett exchanged glances. We'll include that in the documentation, Vanessa finally said. I nodded and left, feeling their eyes burning into my back as I walked across the office to my desk. My phone buzzed with another text from Catherine. Update? I typed, counteroffer accepted. They're including an NDA about irregularities. Her response came quickly. Perfect. Proceed as planned. The next 2 weeks were fascinating. I was suddenly included in executive meetings I'd previously only prepared materials for. People who had barely nodded at me in the hallway now stopped to chat. Daniel brought me coffee. Black, no sugar, just how I liked it, without being asked. I signed their revised offer letter but kept finding concerns with the confidentiality agreement, sending it back to legal with questions that required careful rewording. A delaying tactic Catherine had suggested. The document isn't legally problematic. I explained to my sister Meredith over dinner that weekend. I'm just buying time. Meredith shook her head, twirling pasta around her fork. I still can't believe you're doing this. The old Ellie would have just taken the money and been grateful. I set down my wine glass. The old Ellie let herself be undervalued for 9 years. The new Ellie understands her worth. And the new Ellie is kind of terrifying. Meredith laughed. I love it. For those wondering what happened, because I know you're wondering, let me be clear. I didn't break any laws. I didn't steal company secrets. I didn't sabotage systems. What I did was much more effective. On day 15 after my confrontation, one day after my resignation would have taken effect, I sat across from Garrett, Daniel, Vanessa, and Thomas again. This time we were joined by Amara Jackson, the chair of the board of directors, connecting via video conference. Eleanor, thank you for your patience as we've worked through the details of your new role, Garrett began, smiling that CEO smile that never quite reached his eyes. Before we finalize everything, there's something I need to share with all of you, I said, pulling a slim folder from my bag. We've already approved your requests, Daniel interjected quickly. This isn't about my compensation. I opened the folder and distributed copies of a 15-page document to everyone at the table, sending the digital version to Amara. This is about the $2.7 million that's been systematically diverted from the company through fake vendor accounts over the past 3 years. The room went completely silent. On the screen, Amara leaned forward, eyes narrowing as she scanned the document. I've detailed the transaction patterns, the shell companies involved, and traced the funds to their final destination. I kept my voice calm, professional. I initially flagged these inconsistencies to Daniel 18 months ago, but was told they were approved at the executive level. All eyes turned to Daniel, whose face had gone ashen. There must be some mistake, he stammered. No mistake, I continued. I verified every transaction. The pattern became clear after tracking the first dozen payments. What wasn't clear was who was behind it. I turned to page 12 of my report. The money was carefully dispersed across 7 different LLC entities, all of which trace back to a holding company called Pinewood Ventures. I paused. A holding company registered to Thomas Whitaker's brother-in-law. Thomas's expression didn't change, but his knuckles went white, where his hands gripped the table. "This is absurd," he said evenly. "I've never heard of Pinewood Ventures." "Perhaps not by name," I agreed. "But the signature authorizing the formation documents matches the signature on your marriage certificate to Claire Whitaker, née Peterson. Your brother-in-law, Jordan Peterson, signed both." On the screen, Amara's voice cut through the tension. "Ms. Avery, these are extremely serious allegations. Why bring this to us rather than the authorities?" I met her gaze through the camera. "Because I believe in giving this company the opportunity to address the situation internally first. The fraud has been sophisticated but contained. It appears to involve only a small number of individuals, not systemic corruption." What I didn't say was that Catherine had advised this approach. "Let them think you're doing them a favor," she'd told me. "Give them just enough rope to hang themselves." "I'll need to call in our outside counsel," Amara said, already reaching for her phone. Thomas stood abruptly. "This meeting is over until legal representation for all parties is present." "Sit down, Thomas," Garrett said quietly, his eyes never leaving the documents in front of him. "Eleanor, how long have you been compiling this information?" 18 months, since the first time I reported an irregular payment and was ignored." Daniel looked like he might be sick. "I didn't. I never." "You never asked questions," I finished for him. "You never investigated when I raised concerns. You trusted the wrong people and dismissed the right ones." The next 8 hours were a blur of emergency board calls, outside counsel arriving, security escorting Thomas from the building, and forensic accountants being brought in. I answered questions calmly, provided all my documentation, and watched as the company I'd given 9 years to grappled with the betrayal of its trusted legal counsel. By midnight, it was clear that Thomas had been the architect of the scheme, with 2 accomplices in the accounting department who had helped process the fraudulent payments. Daniel hadn't been complicit, just negligent and too trusting of Thomas, who had assured him the payments were legitimate, executive-approved consultancy fees. I left the building at 1:17 in the midnight, exhausted but eerily calm. Catherine was waiting in her car across the street. "How did it go?" she asked as I slid into the passenger seat. "Exactly as you predicted. Thomas is finished. The board is in panic mode. Garrett and Vanessa are scrambling to contain the damage." Catherine smiled in the darkness. "And you?" "I start as your new chief financial officer next month, as agreed, with a signing bonus matching what they embezzled from their own company." I leaned back against the headrest. "But first, I'm taking 3 weeks off. I haven't had a real vacation in 9 years." What happened after that? Well, that's when things got really interesting. The company tried to keep the embezzlement quiet, but these things have a way of getting out. Within days, Thomas and his accomplices were facing criminal charges. Daniel was placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation into his oversight failures. The board brought in an independent firm to conduct a complete audit of all financial systems I had built and knew inside and out. 2 days before I was set to start my new role at Catherine's company, Garrett called me personally. "Eleanor, I'm hoping we can talk." His voice had lost that CEO confidence. "The audit team is struggling with some of the systems you designed. They're finding it challenging to understand your methodology." I almost laughed. "My methodology is fully documented in the knowledge transfer plan I provided. The one you ignored when you thought you could simply pay me to stay quiet. We're prepared to offer you a consulting fee to assist with the transition. Name your price." "My price?" I echoed. My price was being valued fairly for 9 years of loyalty and expertise. That opportunity has passed. I hung up and blocked his number. When I walked into Catherine's office on my first day as CFO, she greeted me with a glass of champagne. "To new beginnings," she toasted. "And to knowing your worth," I added. Within 6 months, we had secured 3 major clients who had left my former company due to concerns about their financial controls. Within a year, our firm had doubled in size and was recognized as an industry leader in transparent financial practices. I implemented a company-wide transparent compensation structure that ensured equal pay for equal work, regardless of when someone was hired. Every quarter, I personally reviewed salary data to identify and correct any emerging disparities. As for my former employer, they survived, but never fully recovered from the scandal. Garrett was eventually removed by the board. Vanessa left for a position at a smaller firm. Daniel was demarcated to a non-management role after the investigation concluded he had been negligent but not criminal. The company was acquired 2 years later at a fraction of its previous valuation. Sometimes I wonder if things would have been different had they simply valued me properly from the beginning. If Daniel had investigated when I first raised concerns about irregular payments. If Garrett had built a culture of transparency rather than secrecy. But I don't wonder for long, because the truth is, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. So if you're watching this and feeling undervalued, overlooked, or taken for granted, whether at work, in a relationship, or anywhere else in your life, remember my story. Remember that knowing your worth isn't selfish. It's necessary. Your institutional knowledge, your dedication, your skills, they all have value. Real, tangible value. And sometimes, you have to be the one to calculate that value and present the bill. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe. Share in the comments if you've ever had to stand up for your worth. I read every comment and would love to hear your experiences. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message, share this video with them. Because in the end, the most powerful thing you can do isn't seeking revenge. It's recognizing your true value and refusing to accept anything less. And the Employee of the Year goes to Emma. Congratulations on your exceptional team spirit. The room erupted in applause as Emma bounced to the stage, her perfectly styled hair catching the light. Our boss handed her a small box with a white ribbon. She opened it, confusion washing over her face, until she pulled out a key fob with the unmistakable Tesla logo. "No way!" she screamed, jumping up and down. "A Tesla? Are you serious?" Our boss nodded, beaming like a proud father. Model 3, white, just like you wanted. Just like she wanted. Of course he knew what she wanted. The crowd gasped and cheered louder as our boss led everyone outside, where a gleaming white Tesla sat in the parking lot with a giant red bow. Emma was practically hyperventilating as she circled it, trailing her manicured fingers along its pristine surface. I stood frozen, gripping my champagne so tightly I thought the glass might shatter. 3 years of bringing in our largest accounts. 3 years of working until midnight. 3 years of skipped weekends and canceled plans. My portfolio had increased company revenue by 42% this year alone. And now, our boss announced, returning to the podium, for our other top performer. The spotlight found me, and suddenly everyone was looking. I straightened my shoulders and forced a smile. This was my moment, finally. Ashley has been with us for 3 years now, and her contribution has been significant. Significant? I doubled our client base. He reached under the podium and pulled out a thin white envelope. "For you, Ashley. Thank you for your hard work." The envelope felt light between my fingers. I opened it slowly, aware of the watching eyes. Inside was a gift card, $100, to Starbucks. My name was scribbled in smudged ink, barely legible. The silence was deafening. Someone coughed. A few people exchanged glances. "Well?" my boss prompted. "Aren't you going to say something?" I looked up at him, then at Emma stroking her new Tesla through the window, then back at the gift card that wouldn't even cover a month of the coffee I bought while working late. "Thank you," I managed, my voice oddly steady despite the hurricane inside me. It's exactly what I deserved. Nobody caught the edge in my voice. Nobody except Grace from accounting, who winced slightly. Our eyes met across the room, and in that moment, I made a decision that would change everything. I smiled. Not the practiced, professional smile I'd perfected over the years. A different kind of smile. The kind that promises something is coming, something nobody sees yet. Because they'd all learn soon enough that the most dangerous woman in the room isn't the one clutching keys to a new car. It's the one holding a worthless gift card who's finally seeing things clearly. And I was beginning to see very clearly indeed. Wait, before I continue this story of corporate betrayal and calculated vengeance, take a second to hit that like button if you've ever felt undervalued at work. Drop a comment about the worst recognition you've ever received. Subscribe to hear more stories that'll make your jaw drop. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this ends. My name is Ashley Porter. I'm 32, detail-oriented to a fault, and until that night, I believed hard work and results were the currency of success. My mother raised me alone in a small apartment above the diner where she waited tables. "No one will hand you anything in this life," she'd say while soaking her swollen feet after double shifts. "You work twice as hard for half the credit." I'd thought things would be different for me. I'd gone to college on scholarships, graduated with honors, and landed a job at what seemed like the perfect company, a boutique marketing firm specializing in luxury hospitality clients. The kind of place where creativity and numbers were supposed to matter equally. When I started, there were 10 of us. By my third year, we'd grown to nearly 50, with a downtown office and a reputation for turning struggling luxury properties into must-visit destinations. I'd been there 6 months when Emma arrived. She was hired as a junior account manager, same as me. We started friendly enough, a lunch together occasionally, helping each other meet deadlines. Then things changed. The first time I noticed something off was during a presentation for the Wellington, a struggling historic hotel that needed rebranding. I'd spent weeks researching, creating concepts, and preparing financials. Emma had been assigned to assist. "I love what you've put together," she said the night before, flipping through my presentation. "So thorough." The next morning, our boss came in late. Emma was already there, sitting in his usual spot at the head of the table. "I hope everyone's ready," she said. "I've been working on this day and night." Before I could react, she launched into my presentation. Slide by slide, my words, my ideas, my research. When she finished, our boss clapped his hands. "Excellent work, Emma. This is exactly the innovation we need." I sat in stunned silence as she accepted the praise. After the meeting, I approached her privately. "That was my presentation," I said quietly. She looked genuinely confused. "What? No, I put that together myself. We probably just had similar ideas. My file was open on your computer last night." She laughed. "Ashley, sweetie, don't be that person. Nobody likes an office drama queen." I was so shocked by her audacity that I didn't push further. A mistake. The first of many. Over the next 3 years, a pattern emerged. Emma took extended lunches with our boss, organized birthday parties for his children, always laughed the loudest at his jokes. Meanwhile, I put my head down and worked, brought in client after client, built relationships, generated revenue. The Wellington became our biggest success story, doubling its occupancy in 6 months. I created the strategy. Emma took the bows. When they featured it in a hospitality magazine, Emma was photographed beside our boss, both grinning in front of the hotel's grand entrance. "Team effort," she said when I confronted her. "We all played our part." I swallowed my frustration and focused on results. Surely, eventually, the numbers would speak for themselves. They didn't, and now here I was, holding a coffee gift card while Emma had car keys worth $80,000. Later that night, I sat in my apartment, staring at the gift card on my coffee table. My phone buzzed with a text from Grace. "That was messed up. You okay?" I wasn't okay, but I was done being a doormat. What happened next wasn't an emotional decision, though many would later assume it was. It was strategic, calculated, a chess player seeing 20 moves ahead. First, I pulled out my employment contract. When I'd been hired, I'd negotiated an unusual clause. If I chose to leave, I could maintain client contact for 30 days to ensure smooth transitions. The company lawyer had laughed. "Nobody ever leaves voluntarily," he'd said. "But sure, if it makes you feel better." That small clause was now my secret weapon. Second, I created a detailed inventory of every client I'd brought in, every campaign I'd created, every result I'd generated, with numbers, dates, and communications. I didn't sleep that night, but by morning, I had everything I needed. My plan was taking shape, and it would be beautiful in its simplicity. Monday morning, I arrived at work early, dressed in my most professional outfit. When my boss finally showed up at 10:30, I was waiting with an envelope. "What's this?" he asked, barely looking at me. "My resignation letter," I replied calmly. 2 weeks' notice, effective immediately. He glanced up, seemingly more annoyed than concerned. "Resignation? Because of the recognition thing? Don't be so sensitive." "Not at all," I said smoothly. "Family priorities. You understand." He shrugged. "Well, good luck with whatever." I'd expected more reaction. perhaps even a counteroffer. But he was already checking his phone, dismissing me from his thoughts. That was his first mistake. For the next 2 weeks, I was the model departing employee. I organized my files, trained my replacement, brought pastries on my last day. Everyone thought I was leaving with grace, heading off to focus on some vague family matters. Even Emma seemed to buy it, giving me a perfunctory hug on my final day. "Keep in touch," she said, already turning back to her computer. I smiled. "Oh, I plan to stay very connected." She didn't catch my meaning. Nobody did. The moment I walked out those doors for the final time, I initiated phase 2. I sent handwritten notes to our 6 biggest clients, the ones I'd personally cultivated, whose business comprised nearly 60% of the company's annual revenue. The notes were simple: an invitation to a casual industry lunch the following week. No pressure, just a chance to catch up. That evening, my phone rang. My former boss's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring 3 times before answering. "Hello? Ashley, heard you're having a goodbye lunch with some of our clients. How thoughtful. Mind if I join?" His voice was casual, but I caught the edge of worry. "Actually," I replied sweetly, "it's more of a hello lunch. I'm starting my own business." There was silence, then sputtering. "You're… what? You can't. Those are our clients." I kept my voice level. "They're nobody's clients. They choose where to take their business. This is unethical. It's completely legal," I finished for him. "Check Section 12 of my employment agreement. I'm well within my rights to maintain contact during this transition period." He hung up without another word. The morning of the lunch, I woke with knots in my stomach. What if nobody showed? What if I'd misread my relationships with these clients? What if loyalty to the company prevailed? I arrived at the restaurant 30 minutes early, claimed the private room I'd reserved, and waited. Each minute felt like an hour. Then the door opened. Philip Henderson, owner of 3 luxury ski resorts and our oldest client, walked in. Then Mary Zhang from Ocean View Properties. Then the others, one by one. All 6 had come. As we settled in with drinks and appetizers, I felt a surge of confidence. Phase 2 was working perfectly. What I didn't know was that my former boss had his own plans in motion, plans that would test everything I thought I knew about business, loyalty, and justice. And the stakes were about to get much, much higher. I didn't pressure them at lunch. I simply laid out my vision: a boutique agency, providing the same expertise they'd come to value, but with more personalized attention, lower fees, and no corporate bloat. "The truth is," I said, spreading my hands on the table, "large agencies often end up charging premium rates to cover unnecessary overhead. Without fancy downtown offices and company cars to pay for, I can offer the same results at significantly better rates." Mary Zhang, who ran Ocean View Properties, leaned forward. "And it would just be you handling our accounts?" "Initially, yes," I said, "which means you'd have my undivided attention. As we grow, I'll only bring on people who meet my standards for both ethics and excellence." Philip Henderson, normally reserved and cautious, tapped his water glass thoughtfully. "Your work on the Wellington revitalization was exceptional. We all know that campaign was your creation." I felt a rush of validation. They had known all along. "Thank you," I said simply. The table fell quiet as dessert arrived. No one had explicitly committed yet. My heart pounded as I prepared my closing remarks. "I'm not asking you to decide today," I concluded. "Just remember me when your renewal comes up." Philip, who rarely spoke first in any gathering, cleared his throat. "Why wait? I'm moving my business today." The others exchanged glances. Mary was next. "Ocean View's contract renews next month anyway. Consider us on board." By the time the check arrived, all 6 had pledged to follow me. I maintained my composure, but inside I was soaring. As we walked out, Philip held back, touching my elbow gently. "You should know," he said quietly. "Your boss called me this morning, offered a 30% discount if I declined this lunch." My stomach dropped. "And yet, you came." He smiled. "Some things matter more than price, Ashley. Integrity is one of them." "How?" I hadn't anticipated my former boss would move so quickly, but it made sense. He wasn't stupid, just arrogant and short-sighted. Back in my apartment that evening, I allowed myself a small celebration. A glass of wine, a rare moment of pride. Phase 2 was complete. Then my phone exploded with notifications. First came the text from my former boss. "Call me immediately." Then an email from Emma. What have you done? Then a voicemail from Grace. Holy crap, Ashley! The office is in chaos. Call me. I savored each message like a fine appetizer before the main course. Let them stew. Let them wonder. Let them feel what I'd felt. Powerless, confused, devalued. My phone rang again. My former boss. This time, I answered. 6 clients, Ashley? 6? Do you have any idea what you've done? I settled deeper into my couch. I believe I've started my own business with clients who value my work. You've destroyed 3 years of relationships. This is corporate sabotage. No, I corrected calmly. This is the free market at work. Clients choosing where they receive the best service. We'll sue you into oblivion, he snarled. I've already called our attorneys. I suggest they start by reading Section 12 of my employment agreement, I replied, particularly the client transition clause. The silence told me he was finally taking this seriously. Come back, he said, his tone suddenly conciliatory. Let's talk this through. Name your price. Any car you want. Tesla, Mercedes, whatever. I almost laughed. I already have what I want. Think about this, Ashley. You're one person. We're an established company with resources. You can't possibly service all these accounts alone. There it was, the first hint of doubt. Could I really pull this off alone? Watch me, I said, and ended the call. But after hanging up, I sat in the growing darkness of my apartment, worry creeping in. He wasn't entirely wrong. 6 major clients meant endless demands, constant attention, and more work than any single person could handle. Had I overreached? Was my confidence just wounded pride pushing me toward inevitable failure? I was still sitting there when Grace called again. Can you talk? She asked. Not on the phone. In person. We met at a quiet bar far from the office. Grace looked nervous, glancing around as if expecting to be followed. They're not taking this lying down, she said after ordering a drink. They've called an emergency management meeting for tomorrow morning. I heard your boss telling Emma they need to contain the Ashley situation at all costs. What does that mean exactly? Grace leaned closer. They're planning to offer your clients double what you're charging to bring them back. They'll operate at a loss if necessary just to bankrupt you before you can establish yourself. My confidence wavered. I couldn't possibly match that kind of financial flexibility. There's more, Grace continued. They're gathering evidence that you stole confidential information. It's ridiculous, but they're desperate. I didn't take anything that wasn't directly related to my own work, I insisted. I know that, Grace said. But they're building a narrative, and narratives can be powerful, especially with the right attorneys behind them. As I walked home that night, doubt grew like a shadow at sunset. What had seemed like a perfect plan suddenly felt precarious. I was one person against an established company with resources, connections, and desperation, a dangerous combination. The next morning, reality hit harder. My phone rang with the first crisis. Ocean View Properties needed immediate revisions to their summer campaign. An hour later, Philip called about an unexpected competitor undercutting his rates. By noon, 3 more clients had urgent needs that couldn't wait. I worked through lunch, dinner, and well past midnight. The same the next day, and the next. I was drowning in the very success I'd orchestrated. A week into my new venture, I received an email from a law firm representing my former company. Attached was a cease and desist letter claiming I had misappropriated confidential information and violated non-solicitation agreements. It was baseless. I'd been meticulously careful, but fighting it would require time and money I couldn't spare while servicing 6 demanding clients. That same day, Emma posted a company announcement on social media, excited to announce our new client loyalty program offering unprecedented benefits to our valued partners. It was clearly aimed at wooing back the clients I'd taken. 2 weeks in, I was operating on 4 hours of sleep a night. My apartment had transformed into a chaotic office with papers covering every surface. I hadn't cooked a meal or done laundry. Basic self-care had become a luxury I couldn't afford. Then came the first defection. Mary Jane called on a Friday afternoon. Ashley, I need to speak with you about our arrangement. My heart sank. I knew that tone. Your former company reached out, she continued. They're offering a comprehensive package that includes digital marketing, PR, and event management at a significantly reduced rate. With my budget constraints, they're buying your business at a loss, I said, trying to keep frustration from my voice. Once I'm out of the picture, those rates will skyrocket. Perhaps, she acknowledged, But I have shareholders to answer to now. I can't justify paying more for less, even if I prefer working with you. After we hung up, I sat motionless at my makeshift desk, one down. How long before the others followed? My phone buzzed with a text from my former boss. Heard about Ocean View. The offer to come back is still open. Corner office. Significant raise. Your own parking spot. I didn't respond, but doubt crept in like a virus. Maybe this had been a mistake. Maybe corporate politics would always win. Maybe I should cut my losses before I crashed and burned. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 3 a.m., I pulled out the Starbucks gift card that had started it all. $100, the supposed value of my contribution. Anger rekindled, pushing back against doubt. I hadn't come this far to surrender at the first setback. The next morning, I called Philip. I need advice, I admitted. Mary's gone back to my former company. I know, he said. They called me too. My stomach tightened, and I told them to take their offer and shove it someplace uncomfortable. He chuckled. Ashley, did you really think we'd all jump ship because they're temporarily slashing prices? You have a business to run, I said. It would make financial sense. Short term, perhaps. But I've been in business 30 years. I know a desperate play when I see one. More importantly, I know talent when I see it. The work you did for us increased bookings by 40%. That's worth a premium. Instander, relief washed over me. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, he cautioned. They're scared, which makes them dangerous. And you still have a fundamental problem. You can't do this alone. He was right. I needed help, but hiring staff required capital I didn't have. It was a classic catch-22. What would you suggest? I asked. Strategic partnerships, he replied without hesitation. Not employees, but other independent professionals who complement your skills. Split projects, not overhead. It was so obvious I wondered why I hadn't thought of it myself. Probably because I hadn't slept properly in weeks. That afternoon, I reached out to 3 former colleagues who had left the company before me. A financial wizard who'd quit after being repeatedly passed over for promotion. A creative director who'd been pushed out for not being a team player when she questioned unethical practices. A digital strategist who'd left to freelance. All 3 agreed to meet. All 3 had stories similar to mine. All 3 had skills I desperately needed. By the end of the week, we had formed an informal collective, independent professionals, who could collaborate on projects without the overhead of a traditional agency. We created a shared workspace in a converted warehouse that cost a fraction of downtown rent. When my former boss called again, I didn't feel the same uncertainty. Heard you're bringing in reinforcements, he said, attempting casual but failing to hide his concern. Interesting strategy. Just adapting to client needs, I replied. Those independent contractors will leave you the moment something better comes along, he warned. They have no loyalty. Perhaps, I acknowledged. But then, loyalty seems to be in short supply these days, doesn't it? And he changed tactics. This has gone far enough, Ashley. We're preparing legal action. Last chance to come back and avoid an ugly situation. Read Section 12, I reminded him. And while you're at it, check the client ownership clauses. You might find them educational. I hung up feeling stronger than I had in weeks. He was bluffing about legal action. My former company's own contracts were ironically my best protection. They were so focused on protecting the company from employees that they'd never considered the reverse. 3 months in, we weren't just surviving, we were thriving. My collective had grown to 7 independent professionals. We'd implemented Philip's strategy of profit sharing rather than traditional salaries, creating a team where everyone was personally invested in success. Even better, 2 new luxury clients had approached us after hearing about our work. Word was spreading, but my former company wasn't finished. They launched a whisper campaign, suggesting to industry contacts that I was unstable, vindictive, impossible to work with. They hinted at pending litigation. They implied I'd stolen proprietary information. Some potential clients were scared off. One existing client called to express concern. Is there any truth to these rumors? He asked directly. None, I assured him. They're desperate attempts to discredit me because they can't compete on results. He seemed satisfied, but the damage was being done. Doubt is a powerful weapon in business relationships. 4 months in, Grace called with a warning. They're planning something big, she said. Your boss has been in closed-door meetings with legal all week. Emma's involved too. Can you find out what it is? I'm trying, but they're being unusually secretive. Whatever it is, they think it's their silver bullet. I thanked her and tried to push the worry aside. I had clients to serve, projects to complete, a business to build. Then came the email that changed everything. It was from an unfamiliar address, but the subject line froze my blood. Evidence you might find useful. I almost deleted it as spam. Thank goodness I didn't. Inside was a simple message. Thought you should see what they're planning. I can't stand by anymore. Attached were screenshots of internal emails between my former boss, Emma, and the company's legal team. As I read them, my hands began to shake, not with fear, but with something much more powerful. Anticipation. Because in those emails was everything I needed, everything I couldn't have planned for, everything that would transform my revenge from satisfying to legendary. And they had no idea it was coming. The attached emails were a goldmine of incriminating information. My former boss and Emma had been systematically defrauding the company for years. Email after email detailed how Emma had created fake expense reports, claiming client dinners that never happened, travel that never occurred, and team-building events that were actually personal shopping sprees. My former boss had approved every fraudulent claim, while simultaneously denying legitimate expenses from other team members. But that was just the beginning. There were emails discussing how they'd been artificially inflating client invoices, then directing the excess funds to a separate account they controlled. Small amounts from each client, adding up to hundreds of thousands of dollars over time. Most damning of all were the emails about the Wellington campaign, MI campaign. Not only had they taken credit for my work, but they'd also altered the performance reports to minimize my contribution while exaggerating their own. Make sure A's name is buried in the appendix, my boss had written. Keep her visible enough to do the work, but invisible enough that clients associate success with our leadership. Emma's response, already on it. Also deleted her from the presentation attendee list, so there's no record she was even there. As I scrolled through file after file, a strange calm settled over me. This wasn't just about a Tesla versus a gift card anymore. This was about systematic fraud, deception, and theft. Not just from me, but from the company itself. The final email in the thread was from yesterday. Legal thinks we have enough to shut her down permanently. The lawsuit goes out tomorrow. We'll claim she stole client information, violated non-compete clauses, and engaged in unfair business practices. Even if we lose eventually, the legal fees will bankrupt her before it ever gets to court. Set up a call with the remaining clients to let them know their trusted advisor is facing criminal charges. At the bottom of the email was a simple signature, A. It had to be Jasmine, the quiet IT specialist who had always been friendly but kept to herself. I'd helped her once when she was overwhelmed with a project, staying late 3 nights in a row to meet her deadline. I'd forgotten about it. She clearly hadn't. I printed everything, made digital backups, and then considered my options carefully. This wasn't a moment for rash decisions. I could go straight to the police. That would certainly cause problems for my former boss and Emma, but it might also drag the entire company down, including innocent employees like Grace. I could use it as leverage, threatening to expose them unless they backed off. But blackmail, even when you're in the right, is legally and ethically questionable. Or I could be smarter, more strategic. Use this information not just to protect myself, but to build something lasting. I chose the third option. First, I called my small team together and explained the situation. I shared the emails but redacted the parts that could identify who sent them. This changes everything, said Tomas, our financial expert. With this evidence, we could not only stop their lawsuit but countersue for defamation and tortious interference. We could, I agreed, but I have something better in mind. My plan was simple but effective. We would continue building our business, ignoring the threats. When they filed their lawsuit I had knew was coming any day, we would be ready with a response that would blindside them completely. In the meantime, we needed to solidify our client relationships and expand our team. I reached out to 2 more former colleagues who'd been marginalized at the company. Amina, a brilliant media buyer who'd been repeatedly passed over for promotion because she was too quiet, and Daniel, a client relations specialist who'd quit after being blamed for a mistake Emma had made. With a team of 9 independent professionals, we could now handle twice the workload. We signed confidentiality agreements among ourselves and created a formal operating agreement for our collective. We were no longer just a temporary alliance. we were becoming a real company. 2 days later, it happened. A courier delivered a thick envelope containing a lawsuit, naming me as defendant in a case alleging theft of confidential information, client poaching, and unfair business practices. I called our attorney, a friend from college who specialized in business litigation. She reviewed the complaint and the evidence I'd received. "They have no idea what's coming, do they?" she said with a smile in her voice. "Not a clue," I confirmed. We prepared our response carefully, making sure every detail was perfect. When the day came to file it with the court, I asked to deliver it personally. I wanted to see their faces. Their law firm occupied 3 floors of a downtown high-rise. I wore my most professional outfit and carried a sleek leather portfolio containing our response to their lawsuit. The receptionist directed me to a conference room where my former boss, Emma, and 2 attorneys waited. My former boss looked smug. Emma examined her nails, barely acknowledging my presence. "Ms. Porter," one of the attorneys began, "I understand you wanted to discuss settling this matter." "Not exactly," I replied, opening my portfolio. "I'm here to deliver our formal response to your complaint." I slid copies across the table to each of them. "You could have had your attorney do this," my former boss said with a dismissive wave. "I wanted to watch you read it," I said simply. Their attorney opened the document first, scanning the introduction. His expression remained neutral until he reached page 3. Then his eyebrows shot up. He flipped through the next several pages rapidly, his face growing increasingly concerned. "What is it?" my former boss demanded. "Sir, I think we should discuss this privately," the attorney said quietly. "Just tell me," he snapped. The attorney cleared his throat. "They've filed a countersuit for fraud, embezzlement, defamation, harassment, and there's evidence attached. Emails, financial records." My former boss grabbed the document, his face reddening as he read. Emma leaned over his shoulder, her complexion turning ashen. "Where did you get these?" she whispered. "Let's just say not everyone at your company appreciates being associated with fraud," I replied. "Our filing includes copies to the district attorney's office, the state attorney general, and the Securities and Exchange Commission, since your company is publicly traded." The second attorney, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "We should adjourn this meeting immediately." "One more thing," I said, placing another document on the table. "This is a press release going out tomorrow morning, announcing that my company has been awarded a contract with the Wellington Hotel Group to manage all 7 of their properties worldwide. Philip Henderson personally recommended us after the success of our previous campaign." I stood to leave, pausing at the door. "Oh, and we're hiring. Several positions just opened up at our firm. I believe you'll be needing new jobs very soon." The aftermath unfolded exactly as I'd anticipated. The lawsuit against me was withdrawn by the end of the day. Within a week, both my former boss and Emma were placed on administrative leave pending investigation. 3 weeks later, they were fired for cause. No severance, no references, no golden parachutes. The company's board reached out to me directly, asking for a meeting. I agreed, but on my terms. The meeting would be at my office, not theirs. When the day arrived, 3 board members entered our converted warehouse space. They looked out of place among our modern, minimalist decor and collaborative workspace. No corner offices here, no status symbols, just smart people doing exceptional work. "Impressive operation," the board chair said, looking around. "You've built this in just 5 months? When you focus on talent instead of appearances, it's amazing what you can accomplish," I replied. They'd come with an offer. They wanted to acquire my company, rolling our team and clients back into their organization. They promised autonomy, resources, and recognition. "We've recognized the cultural issues that led to your departure," the chair explained. "We're committed to restructuring." "For what amount?" I asked. The number they suggested was substantial, enough that I could have retired comfortably at 32. "I appreciate the offer," I said after pretending to consider it, "but we're not for sale." They looked genuinely surprised. "May I ask why not?" I gestured around the room where my team was working. "Because we're building something based on values your company never understood. Fairness, transparency, and genuine appreciation for talent. We're proving you don't need fancy offices or company cars to deliver exceptional results. Just good people, treated well." "We could offer more," another board member suggested. "It's not about the money," I said. It never was. After they left, my team gathered around. We'd all heard the offer. We'd all heard me decline what would have been life-changing money for each of us. Are you sure? Tomas asked. That was a serious offer. I nodded. We're just getting started. In a year, they'll wish they'd offered twice as much. He smiled. Then, I guess we better get back to work. 6 months later, we moved into a new office. Not downtown, but in a renovated industrial building with abundant natural light, collaborative spaces, and a rooftop garden. Every team member had contributed to the design, creating a space that reflected our values. On our first day in the new space, I gathered everyone together. We'd grown to 17 team members, all working on a profit-sharing model that meant everyone had skin in the game. I have something to show you, I said, unveiling a framed object on the wall. It was the Starbucks gift card, mounted against a background of black velvet. Beneath it was a small brass plate engraved with the words, "Know Your Worth." Grace, who had joined us 3 months earlier after my former company downsized her department, raised her glass of champagne. To knowing your worth. And to coffee, Tomas added with a grin, which, ironically, this card has never purchased. Everyone laughed. I looked around at these talented people who had taken a chance on a new vision, who had trusted me when I asked them to turn down acquisition offers and keep building. And I felt something more satisfying than revenge: vindication. I still check industry news occasionally. My former boss now works at a much smaller agency in a junior position. Apparently, fraud allegations make finding executive jobs difficult. Emma tried to start her own consulting business but couldn't attract clients. Last I heard, she had to sell the Tesla to cover legal fees. As for me, I drive a practical hybrid, not because I can't afford better, but because I'd rather invest in the people who make our success possible. We now have a program that helps team members buy homes, providing interest-free loans for down payments. We offer 6 months of paid parental leave. We close the office for 2 weeks each year so everyone can truly disconnect. Our client list has tripled. Our revenue has quadrupled. And every new team member gets the same tour I give prospective clients, ending at the framed gift card. What's the story there? They inevitably ask. Just a reminder, I always reply. Sometimes being undervalued is the universe telling you it's time to value yourself. And descaspad, if you've ever been overlooked, underpaid, or unappreciated, remember this. Your worth isn't determined by someone else's inability to see your value. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's getting ahead, building something better, and bringing good people along with you. Drop a comment if you've ever had a boss who didn't appreciate you. Like this video if you found your own way to succeed despite the doubters. And subscribe for more stories about turning life's disappointments into your greatest opportunities. Because the best comebacks aren't just about proving others wrong. They're about proving yourself right. For your 5 years of service, Adira, we have something special for you. The conference room fell silent as Phoebe's words hung between us. Everyone had gathered, lab technicians, researchers, administrative staff, all watching with strange smiles I couldn't quite read. The red gift box sat between us on the table, tied with a white satin ribbon that looked expensive. Too expensive for a standard work anniversary. I reached for it, noticing how my coworkers leaned forward slightly. Someone's phone was pointed at me, recording. Go ahead, Phoebe urged, her smile tight and perfect. Open it. The ribbon came undone easily. I lifted the lid, expecting maybe a watch or a gift card. Instead, a stack of papers with bold red lettering across the top. Notice of termination. Unfortunately, Phoebe announced to the room, not to me. Some team members resist progress and innovation. At Bridgewell, we can't afford obstruction when lives depend on our medications reaching patients. Laughter rippled through the crowd. My hands trembled as I lifted the papers. Sight, obstructive behavior, and inability to align with company objectives. I read aloud, my voice surprisingly steady despite the hurricane inside me. Dale from marketing zoomed in with his phone camera, capturing my face. This is gold, he whispered to Jen beside him. 5 years. 5 years of 60-hour weeks, missed dinners, canceled vacations. 5 years of believing I was making a difference. Phoebe extended a pen. We'll need your signature, of course. Something in me hardened then. I took the pen, signed my name with one fluid motion, placed the cap back on carefully, and stood up. Thank you for the opportunity, I said, looking Phoebe directly in the eyes. I wish you all the best with the Luminax launch. The smile faltered on her face, just for a second. That tiny crack in her perfect composure was worth everything. I walked out with my head high, though my legs felt like they might give way with each step. Behind me, the party continued, cake being served, people already forgetting the woman who'd just lost everything. They had no idea what I'd already done. If you've ever felt that burn of betrayal, that moment when the floor drops from beneath you and suddenly everything you believed about your life is a lie, hit that like button. Subscribe to hear how this story ends, because trust me, what happened next changed not just my life, but saved thousands of others. And let me know in the comments if you've ever had to choose between doing what's right and doing what's easy. My name is Adira Knight. Until 3 months ago, I was Senior Quality Assurance Specialist at one of America's fastest-growing pharmaceutical companies. I graduated top of my class with a master's in biochemistry and joined the company believing I would help ensure medications reaching patients were safe and effective. The first 2 years were everything I'd hoped for. I lived for the precision of the lab, the reliability of data, the satisfaction of verifying that what we produced matched exactly what we promised. My tiny apartment near the research campus became more of a storage unit than a home. I lived and breathed my work. Phoebe Landry joined as Chief Quality Officer in my 3rd year. She swept in with designer suits and presentations about streamlining processes and accelerating approval timelines. The executive team adored her. She spoke their language: profits, market share, shareholder value. I first noticed the problem 6 months ago during routine testing of Luminax, our new blockbuster medication for chronic pain. The samples showed unusual variations in the active compound, small enough to pass automated quality checks, but concerning when viewed as a pattern across multiple batches. "This is well within acceptable ranges," Phoebe said when I brought her the results. We stood in her glass-walled office, the lab visible beyond, everyone watching but unable to hear. "Technically, yes," I replied, "but 3 consecutive batches showing the same deviation suggests a systematic issue in production." She smiled, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Adira, honey, do you know how many people are suffering right now, waiting for this medication? Every day we delay is another day someone's grandmother can't get out of bed from pain. Every day we rush is a day we risk sending something dangerous to that same grandmother," I countered. Her eyes hardened. "Run the tests again. I'm sure you'll find everything's fine." I ran them again and again. Each time, the results showed the same problem. Under specific conditions, the kind that would exist in a human liver, Luminax broke down into compounds that showed potential toxicity. I documented everything meticulously. Each test, each result, each conversation. When I submitted my findings through our quality assurance portal, they vanished within hours. No acknowledgement, no follow-up, just gone, as if I'd never submitted them. Late one evening, while searching for my missing reports, I discovered something that turned my concern to horror. The original trial data for Luminax had been altered. Subtle changes, a decimal point moved, a percentage adjusted, but enough to hide the very issue I was seeing now. Someone had known about the toxicity problem from the beginning. I needed allies. Juno in the adjacent lab had been with the company even longer than me. I carefully approached her during lunch break, away from cameras and curious ears. "Have you noticed anything unusual with the Luminax results?" I asked, keeping my voice casual. Her spoon paused halfway to her mouth. "Why do you ask? Just some inconsistencies I'm trying to sort out? Probably nothing." She lowered her voice. "Look, I don't know what you found, but don't push it. Last year, Thomas in quality control raised concerns about another medication. 2 weeks later, he was gone. Performance issues, they said. Nobody's heard from him since. That night, I couldn't sleep. Was I being paranoid? Was I missing something obvious that explained the results? Or was I witnessing something genuinely dangerous being deliberately ignored? The annual leadership retreat at Lake Pinewood provided my answer. I wasn't invited, but as quality lead on Luminax, I was asked to prepare materials for Phoebe's presentation. I delivered them personally to the resort, hoping to emphasize my concerns one more time. I found the conference room door slightly ajar, and Phoebe's voice drifting out. "The Q4 timeline is ambitious but achievable," she was saying. "We can have Luminax on shelves by December if we move forward now." "What about those testing anomalies?" our CEO asked. "The board is nervous about another recall." "Minor variations," Phoebe dismissed. "Nothing that impacts safety or efficacy. The profit potential here is enormous. First to market in this category means we own the space for years." I couldn't help myself. I pushed the door open. Those aren't minor variations, I said, 7 pairs of executive eyes turning to me in shock. Batch 457 showed liver toxicity at standard dosages. We need expanded testing before. Adira, Phoebe cut me off. Thank you for dropping off the materials. We won't keep you. People could get sick, I persisted. We need to understand why. Some people, Phoebe said coldly, value bureaucracy over healing patients. The suffering of people waiting for this medication apparently means nothing compared to checking boxes on forms. The CEO frowned. Is this true, Phoebe? Is there a safety concern? Absolutely not, she replied smoothly. Adira is extremely thorough, which we value, but in this case, she's misinterpreting standard variances. I've had 3 independent reviewers confirm the results are within parameters. That was a lie. There had been no independent review. I opened my mouth to say so, but the look in Phoebe's eyes stopped me. It wasn't just anger, it was promise. A promise that pursuing this would end badly for me. I nodded stiffly and left, my mind racing. If I couldn't work within the system, I needed to find another way. That night, I contacted Dr. Eliza Ward at the university where I'd done my graduate work. Without mentioning specifics, I asked if she could analyze some samples as part of a theoretical research project. She agreed. For the next 6 weeks, I lived a double life. At work, I appeared to have accepted Phoebe's decision, focusing on other projects. But I carefully collected samples, test results, and data, passing them to Eliza under the radar. Then came my work anniversary and that red box with termination papers. What Phoebe didn't know as I walked out of that conference room was that Eliza's team had confirmed my findings the night before. Luminax, in its current formulation, posed a significant risk of liver damage in roughly 15% of patients, especially among older adults, the very population most likely to use it. I had the evidence. But without access to company systems, how could I stop a dangerous medication from reaching the market? Who would believe a fired employee with an apparent vendetta? As I cleaned out my desk, guarded by security as if I might steal staplers on my way out, Kai from the lab passed by. He'd always been kind to me, though we weren't close. I'm sorry, he whispered. This isn't right. It's fine, I said automatically. No, it's not. He glanced around, then slipped me his card. Call me. Not everyone agrees with what's happening. That card became my lifeline, because what Phoebe also didn't know was that her perfect moment of triumph was coming, the holiday party coinciding with FDA approval announcement for Luminax. And I was already planning to be there. I stared at Kai's card for 3 days before I called him. 3 days of alternating between rage and despair in my apartment, staring at the ceiling and replaying 5 years of memories, wondering where I'd gone wrong. The morning of the 4th day, I made the call. Meet me at Copper Kettle, the one on Elmwood, Kai said, voice barely above a whisper. 7 tonight, come alone and don't tell anyone. The cafe was busy enough that we wouldn't stand out but quiet enough to talk. Kai sat in the corner, hood pulled up despite the warm evening. His eyes darted around constantly. Are you being followed? I asked, only half joking as I slid into the chair across from him. He didn't smile. Maybe. Phoebe has been on a rampage since you left. Surprise inspections of workstations, checking phone logs, monitoring emails. Why? I'm gone. She won. Kai leaned forward. Because the day after you left, someone accessed the secure server and downloaded all the original Luminax trial data. My heart skipped. It wasn't me. I know. It was me. I nearly knocked over my coffee. You? Keep your voice down, he hissed. Look, I've been watching. The things you found? I saw them too, but I was too scared to say anything. When they fired you like that, humiliated you in front of everyone, he shook his head. It wasn't right. So you risked your job to what? Get revenge for me? Not for you. For my sister. His voice cracked slightly. She has chronic pain. She'd be first in line for Luminax. If what you found is true. I pulled out my phone, showed him the message from Eliza confirming her team's findings. Kai read it, his face growing paler. They're planning to announce FDA approval at the holiday party next month, he said. Phoebe's already been promised a vice presidency. The marketing campaign launches the following day. How can they have approval already if the medication is dangerous? The data they submitted to the FDA was cleaned up. Perfect safety profile. He slid a flash drive across the table. This is what they should have seen. I stared at the tiny device that could destroy a billion-dollar launch and end multiple careers. What am I supposed to do with this? I've been fired. No one will listen to me. Not alone, they won't. Kai took a sip of his tea. But you're not alone anymore. That night, I met Juno, who had processed many of the same lab results I had. Then Reed from legal, who had been troubled by unusual confidentiality agreements around Luminax. Finally, Talia from clinical trials, who had noticed patient complaints being systematically downgraded in severity. A small resistance was forming, but we faced an impossible challenge: how to stop a medication launch when the company controlled all official channels. "We need someone outside the company," Reed said during our third meeting. "This one in the back room of a bookstore owned by his cousin. Someone with enough authority to demand attention." The FDA, suggested Juno. Reed shook his head. "They'll just refer it back to the company for internal investigation. By the time that process plays out, the medication will be on the market." "Media?" offered Talia. "Maybe," I said. "But we need someone who understands the science, who won't sensationalize, but also won't back down under pressure." That's when Talia mentioned Zoe Harper, an investigative health reporter known for exposing pharmaceutical industry problems. She broke the story on those contaminated antibiotics last year. The manufacturer tried to discredit her, threatened lawsuits, but she held firm. Every detail in her reporting was verified. "How do we reach her?" I asked. "I know someone who knows someone," Talia said with a small smile. 2 days later, I sat across from Zoe in a park 3 towns over, watching ducks glide across a pond while I explained everything. She listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes. "You understand what you're asking?" she said finally. "Your career in pharmaceuticals will be over. Forever. No company will touch you after this." "My career ended the moment I opened that gift box," I replied. "Now I'm just trying to prevent people from being hurt." She studied me, then nodded. "I'll need to verify everything independently. No offense, but you can't just take my word for it." "I get it." I handed her contact information for Eliza at the university. "Start here. She can confirm the independent testing. If, and I stress if, I can corroborate your claims, what exactly did you have in mind?" That's when the plan started forming. Zoe would investigate quietly, building her case. Meanwhile, we needed to find a way into the holiday party, the moment when the company would be most vulnerable, when everyone who mattered would be in one room. "They've hired an outside catering company," Kai reported a week later. "Temporary staff for the evening." A path opened before me. Getting hired by the catering company was surprisingly easy. A few details changed on my resume: hair dyed a different color, glasses instead of my usual contacts. No one at the company had any reason to look twice at servers. The weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Zoe built her case methodically, gathering documents, interviewing former patients from the clinical trials, consulting independent experts. I practiced being invisible, learning the rhythms and expectations of catering work through a few smaller events. The night before the holiday party, we gathered one last time. "Are you sure about this?" Juno asked me. "Once it starts, there's no turning back." "I'm sure," I said, though my stomach twisted with anxiety. "What about you? You're all still employed there. The blowback will hit you too." "Some things matter more than jobs," Reed said quietly. As we parted ways, Talia hugged me tightly. "Be careful tomorrow. Phoebe is dangerous when cornered." I barely slept that night, running through every possible scenario, every potential failure point. By morning, I felt hollow-eyed but resolute. The venue was a historic mansion converted into an event space, all gleaming hardwood and crystal chandeliers. Staff entered through the back, past security that barely glanced at our IDs. Inside, dozens of white-clothed tables surrounded a small stage. A banner hung above it, celebrating innovation, changing lives. I tied on my black apron, pulled my hair back, and became just another server arranging silverware and folding napkins. At 6 o'clock, guests began arriving. Executives in expensive suits, regulatory officials, investors, marketing teams. I kept my head down, offering trays of appetizers, refilling water glasses, all while scanning the room. Phoebe arrived fashionably late, wearing a stunning emerald dress that made heads turn. The CEO greeted her with air kisses and a champagne flute. "The woman of the hour," he announced, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. I moved closer, pretending to collect empty glasses. "The FDA just sent the final approval letter this afternoon," Phoebe was saying. "We're officially clear to launch." "Perfect timing," the CEO replied. "The press release goes out at 9 tonight, during your speech." By morning, our stock will be soaring. My hand trembled slightly, nearly toppling the glasses on my tray. It was really happening. The medication that could harm thousands was about to be unleashed. Dinner service began. I worked methodically, face blank, invisible among the celebration. Across the room, I spotted Kai seated with other mid-level staff. He caught my eye briefly, gave an imperceptible nod. At 8:30, Zoe texted, "In position. Ready when you are." The plan was simple. Zoe would enter during the public portion of the event, using her press credentials. The timing had to be perfect. After Phoebe's announcement, but before the evening concluded, when everyone who mattered would still be present. I was clearing plates from the main course when a security guard approached me. "You, server, what are you doing back here?" We were in a service corridor that led toward the event office, where Zoe and I had planned to meet. "Just taking a shortcut to the kitchen," I said, gesturing with my tray of dirty plates. He frowned. "Kitchen's the other direction." My heartbeat thundered in my ears. "Oh, sorry, first night here, still learning the layout." He studied my face a moment too long. "Do I know you from somewhere?" "I don't think so," I forced a smile. "I just have one of those faces people think they recognize." After what felt like an eternity, he shrugged. "Kitchen's back that way. Don't wander around where you shouldn't be." I nodded, turned around, and walked away, my legs shaking. That had been too close. I needed to be more careful. The CEO tapped his glass for attention as dessert was being served. "Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our Chief Quality Officer and soon-to-be Vice President of Research and Development, Phoebe Landry." Applause filled the room as Phoebe took the stage, radiant with triumph. I positioned myself near the back, close to where Zoe would enter. "Thank you all," Phoebe began. "Tonight represents the culmination of years of dedication and perseverance. Luminax isn't just another medication, it's a revolution in pain management that will change countless lives." She continued, describing the rigorous testing and unwavering commitment to safety that had brought Luminax to this moment. Each word was a twist of the knife. "I'm proud to announce that today, we received final FDA approval for Luminax. By this time next month, patients across the country will experience relief many thought impossible." Cheers erupted. Glasses clinked. The CEO beamed. "None of this would be possible without my incredible team," Phoebe continued, though I noticed she named no one specifically. "Their dedication to our mission has been inspiring." That's when I saw Zoe slip in through the side entrance, press badge visible. Our eyes met briefly. I gave the slightest nod. "And so," Phoebe said, raising her glass, "I invite you all to toast with me, to Luminax, to innovation, to changing lives." "Excuse me," Zoe called out, her clear voice cutting through the moment. "Zoe Harper, Health Investigations. I have some questions about patient trial irregularities in the Luminax approval process." The room went still. Phoebe's smile froze on her face. "This is a private event," the CEO said, stepping forward. "The press portion begins in 30 minutes. Zoe didn't budge. "I have copies of original lab reports showing liver toxicity rates significantly higher than what was reported to regulators. Would you care to comment?" The glass slipped from Phoebe's hand, shattering on the stage. And in that moment, watching her perfect world begin to crack, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: hope. The sound of shattering glass echoed through the suddenly silent room. Hundreds of eyes darted between Phoebe on stage and Zoe standing confidently in the center aisle. "Security," the CEO murmured to someone beside him, but Zoe was already moving forward. "I have copies of unaltered test results showing that Luminax causes severe liver damage in certain populations," she continued, her voice carrying easily in the hushed space. "Results that mysteriously disappeared from your official FDA submission." Phoebe recovered quickly, her smile returning, though it seemed plastered on. "Ms. Harper, is it? I'm not sure what documents you think you have, but Luminax has undergone the most rigorous testing in our company's history." "Including batch 457? Zoe asked. "The one showing toxicity levels 6 times higher than disclosed to regulators?" A ripple went through the room. I noticed several FDA representatives exchanging concerned glances. "This is hardly the appropriate forum," Phoebe began. "I also have testimony from researchers involved in the original trials," Zoe continued, undeterred. "Patients who experienced severe side effects that were downgraded or omitted from final reports." 2 security guards approached Zoe from opposite sides of the room. I slipped further into the shadows, heart pounding. "This is absurd," the CEO declared, stepping forward. We'll be pursuing legal action for these slanderous accusations. Zoe smiled. I welcome that, sir. Discovery would be fascinating. She turned to address the room. 3 independent laboratories have verified these findings. My full report with supporting documentation goes live at midnight tonight. The guards reached her, each taking an arm. Is it true? Someone called out. An older man in an expensive suit who I recognized as the head FDA reviewer for Luminax. Were safety results altered? Absolutely not, Phoebe insisted, but her voice had lost its authoritative edge. That's when Kai stood up. All eyes turned to him. I was on the original testing team, he said clearly. The results were altered. I have the originals. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Another person stood. Juno. I can confirm that, she said. The liver toxicity data was systematically removed from reports. This is a coordinated attack, Phoebe sputtered. Disgruntled employees trying to damage our reputation. Talia rose next. I supervised patient interviews during clinical trials. Numerous patients reported symptoms consistent with liver damage that never appeared in final documentation. The room erupted in voices. The FDA officials huddled together, speaking urgently. Investors began moving toward exits, already pulling out phones. The security guards, unsure what to do with Zoe now, released her arms and looked to the CEO for direction. I stayed hidden, watching it all unfold. This was never about me being the hero. It was about the truth finding its way to the surface through many voices. Phoebe scanned the room frantically, looking for allies and finding uncertain faces instead. Then her eyes locked with mine. Recognition dawned. Even with different hair and glasses, she knew me. Her expression transformed from confusion to rage in an instant. You, she hissed, the microphone still catching her voice. You did this. All eyes followed her gaze. My cover was blown, but it didn't matter now. The truth was already spreading through the room like wildfire. Unstoppable. I stepped forward, removing my glasses. I didn't falsify data, Phoebe. I just made sure the real data wasn't buried forever. The CEO grabbed the microphone. This event is concluded. Please exit in an orderly fashion. We'll be issuing a formal statement tomorrow addressing these baseless accusations. Nobody moved. If they're baseless, called out one of the FDA officials, then you won't mind showing us the original data files tonight. That's not possible on such short notice, the CEO stammered. Actually, Reed said, standing up from a table near the back, as legal counsel, I can tell you we're required to maintain those files for regulatory review at any time. They should be immediately accessible. The room descended into chaos. Executives huddled together in urgent conversation. Investors made phone calls in corners. The FDA officials approached Zoe, examining the documents she carried. Through it all, Phoebe remained frozen on stage, staring at me with undisguised hatred. I moved toward the exit, my part in this drama complete. Outside, the cold night air hit my lungs like freedom. My phone buzzed with a text from Kai. They're demanding access to the servers now. FDA putting approval on immediate hold. Justice was rolling forward without me now. An unstoppable force. I sat on a bench in the garden outside the venue, listening to the muffled sounds of the imploding party, and waited. Nearly an hour later, Zoe found me there. Hell of a night, she said, sitting beside me. Will it be enough? I asked. The FDA has officially suspended approval pending a full investigation. Your friends inside are being interviewed as we speak. She smiled slightly. The company's stock is going to take a beating when markets open tomorrow. And Phoebe? When I left, she was having what appeared to be a very unpleasant conversation with federal regulators. Zoe paused. You should know, she's claiming you fabricated evidence because you were fired. I laughed softly. Of course she is. It won't work. Too many people are corroborating your version now. The dam has broken. She studied me curiously. How does it feel? I considered the question. Not like I expected. I thought I'd feel triumphant or vindicated. Instead, I just feel tired and sad that it had to come to this. What will you do now? I have no idea. I stared up at the stars. My career in pharmaceuticals is over. Whistleblowers don't get hired. Heroes might, she replied. 3 months later, I sat in a different kind of conference room, this one in Washington, D.C. The congressional hearing on safety and oversight in pharmaceutical approval processes had been underway for 4 hours, and I was the final witness. Miss Knight, said the committee chairwoman, your testimony today has been invaluable. can you tell us what you believe would prevent similar situations in the future? I leaned toward the microphone. The problem isn't a lack of regulations, but enforcement. Quality assurance professionals need protected channels to report concerns without fear of retaliation. Independent verification should be standard for all safety data, not exceptional. And what happened to you after you reported these concerns internally? I was publicly fired on my 5th work anniversary. My boss presented me with termination papers as a gift in front of my colleagues. Murmurs filled the chamber. And where is your former boss now? Phoebe Landry is currently awaiting trial on charges of fraud, falsification of data, and conspiracy to distribute a potentially harmful substance. The investigation had revealed more than even I had known. Phoebe had been cutting corners on multiple medications, building her reputation as a miracle worker who could get approvals when others couldn't. The company's stock had dropped 60%. The CEO had resigned. 3 board members were under investigation. Ms. Knight, final question, the chairwoman said. Given what happened, would you make the same choice again? I thought about the cost, my career, my financial security, months of anxiety and uncertainty. Then I thought about the thousands of people who might have suffered liver damage or worse. Without hesitation, I answered. The hearing concluded. As I gathered my notes, a woman approached me, stern-faced, impeccably dressed. Adira Knight? I'm Dr. Naomi Chen, director of the newly formed Pharmaceutical Integrity Commission. We're building an independent oversight body with authority to investigate safety concerns across the industry. She handed me a business card. We need people who understand the science and have the courage to stand up for what's right. I'd like to discuss a position with you. I stared at the card in disbelief. You want to hire me? Sometimes, she said with a small smile. Doing the right thing should be rewarded, not punished. 1 year later, I stood in my new office, unpacking the last box of belongings. The Pharmaceutical Integrity Commission had grown quickly, becoming a powerful force for accountability in the industry. As Director of Quality Review, I led a team dedicated to independently verifying safety data for medications before approval. The last item in my box was a frame containing those termination papers from Phoebe. I hung them on the wall beside my credentials, a reminder of where I'd been and why this work mattered. My phone rang. Kai, now, our liaison with industry scientists. Turn on the news, he said without preamble. I clicked on the small TV in my office. Breaking news banner. Former pharmaceutical executive sentenced to 8 years for fraud. There was Phoebe, being led away in handcuffs after her sentencing hearing. The reporter was summarizing the case. Found guilty on all counts related to the falsification of safety data for the pain medication Luminax. Prosecutors credited whistleblower Adira Knight with preventing what could have been a public health disaster. I turned off the TV, feeling a complex mix of emotions. Not joy at her downfall, but relief that justice had been served, that the system, however imperfectly, had eventually worked. My assistant knocked on the door. Dr. Chen wants to know if you've finished reviewing the Mitchell proposal. The board meets in 20 minutes. Just finishing up, I said, turning to my desk where a stack of research data awaited my analysis. This was my revenge, not Phoebe's downfall, but this, building something better from the ashes of what had happened. Creating a system where the next person who found dangerous data wouldn't have to risk everything to be heard, where patient safety truly came before profit. I picked up the Mitchell file and headed to the boardroom, leaving the framed termination papers on my wall, a reminder that sometimes the most powerful response to being pushed out a door is building your own house. If this story moved you, please hit like and subscribe. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between what was easy and what was right? Share your story in the comments. And remember, sometimes what looks like the end of your story is really just the beginning of a better one. Pack your desk. You're worthless now. The words sliced into me as Phoebe stood over my cubicle, her diamond bracelet catching the light as she gestured dismissively at my workspace. Every head in the office turned. 20 pairs of eyes witnessed my public execution. But the system launch is next week, I whispered, my voice barely audible even to myself. A system we no longer need you for, she replied, loud enough for everyone to hear. The acquisition is complete. I've been given full control of implementation with a $50 million budget. Your contribution is no longer required. My hands hovered over my keyboard, suddenly foreign objects I couldn't control. Just 30 minutes earlier, the company-wide email had announced our acquisition. Phoebe had been promoted to Chief Integration Officer with a budget that made everyone's eyes widen. Now I understood why she'd been smiling so smugly during the announcement. "You have 20 minutes, she added, glancing at her watch. "Security will escort you out." As I robotically placed my personal items into a cardboard box, my mind raced through the implications. My rent was due next week. My savings would cover 3 months, maybe 4 if I ate nothing but ramen. The job market was tight, and the 3 years I'd spent building this company's crown jewel, the integration system that had made us an acquisition target, couldn't even be properly listed on my resume because Phoebe had ensured my name appeared. Nowhere in the official documentation. I walked out with my head high, though my legs felt like they might buckle with each step. The security guard, Tom, who'd always greeted me warmly each morning, avoided my eyes as he took my badge. "This isn't right," he muttered under his breath. Outside, rain poured down in sheets, soaking through my thin blouse as I waited for a taxi. My coat was still hanging on the back of my chair. I wouldn't go back for it. The taxi driver kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror. "Bad day?" he asked. I met his eyes, suddenly aware of mascara tracks down my cheeks. "The worst," I replied. "Or maybe not. Maybe this is just the beginning." I didn't know then how prophetic those words would be. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, hit the like button. If you've ever fantasized about getting even, subscribe now. Because what happens next in this story might just be the most satisfying thing you'll hear all day. My name is Ivy Carter, and until 2 hours ago, I was the lead architect for a tech integration system that transformed customer data into actionable insights. Not the sexiest description, but that system had just made our CEO rich and earned my boss a $50 million budget. I'm 32, single, and until today, I thought I was successful. I'd sacrificed everything for my career: relationships, sleep, even the painting classes I once loved. My apartment had become just a place to crash between coding marathons. My fridge contained nothing but coffee creamer and week-old takeout. Growing up with a single mom who worked 3 jobs taught me one thing: security comes from making yourself indispensable. So I'd made myself exactly that. Or so I thought. I stumbled into my apartment and dropped the sad box of desk plants and coffee mugs on the floor. A framed photo slid out, the company holiday party from last year. There I was, standing in the background while Phoebe posed center stage with the executive team. Phoebe Blake, my boss for 3 years, a woman who'd once told me we were going places together. I'd believed her. We'd started on the same day. Me as a developer, her as project manager. I created the systems. She presented them to clients. I stayed late debugging. She networked at happy hours. When she was promoted to director, she brought me with her as her technical lead. "We're a team," she'd said. "Your brain, my face." I believed her because I wanted to, because I was more comfortable with code than people, because presenting to rooms full of executives made my palms sweat and my words tangle, because Phoebe seemed to genuinely value my work, even if she never quite understood how it functioned, until she did. 3 months ago, I noticed her asking different questions, taking more detailed notes, requesting access to repositories she'd never cared about before. I thought she was finally taking an interest in the technical side. I was flattered. I pulled my laptop from my bag and opened it on my kitchen counter. My personal laptop, thank goodness, not my work computer. As it booted up, I poured myself a glass of wine I couldn't afford to waste, but desperately needed. The integration system had been my idea from the start. When our company struggled to differentiate itself, I proposed a solution that would seamlessly connect disparate data sources in real time, something our competitors couldn't do. The executives were skeptical until Phoebe championed it. "Ivy can build this," she had told them confidently. "I'll make sure of it." For 18 months, I barely slept. I built, tested, rebuilt, and refined. When early tests showed promising results, Phoebe began showcasing the system to potential investors. The demos were carefully scripted. I would set everything up, then step aside as Phoebe wowed them with the interface I'd designed. "It's just business," she explained. "They respond better to my presentation style." She wasn't wrong. Phoebe had a way of making people feel both impressed and at ease. Her background in sales had taught her exactly how to read a room. Meanwhile, I preferred the comfort of my code. As the system gained attention, so did Phoebe. Industry magazines featured her as an innovator to watch. At conferences, she was invited to speak about her revolutionary approach. I told myself it didn't matter. We were a team and teams shared credit. What a fool I'd been. I opened my email and stared at the message that had arrived minutes before my termination. Exciting news, acquisition complete. The CEO thanked everyone for their hard work, especially highlighting Phoebe's visionary leadership in developing the integration system that had caught the buyer's attention. My name appeared nowhere. My phone buzzed. A text from Leo, one of the junior developers. "What happened? Are you okay?" I stared at it, unsure how to respond. Leo had joined 6 months ago. I'd trained him personally, showing him the architecture I'd created, the elegant solutions to complex problems. "I'm fine," I typed back. "Just business." Another message appeared below it. "Phoebe called an emergency meeting. Says there are concerns about the system documentation. Says only she understands how to fix it." My fingers froze over the screen. Documentation. I'd documented everything meticulously. It was my nature. Every function, every variable, every potential edge case. But the documentation lived in a secure repository that only I had full access to. Or so I thought. 2 weeks ago, IT had performed a routine security update that required everyone to reset their passwords. Had Phoebe somehow gained access during that window? I quickly logged into the repository. Everything looked normal, except there was a download history I didn't recognize. Someone had exported the entire documentation library last Friday evening, the night of the company party. The party I'd skipped to complete the final module. A cold sensation washed over me. She'd planned this, waited until the system was complete, the documentation finished, and the acquisition guaranteed. Then she'd taken everything and cut me loose. I was replaceable. Worthless. I closed my laptop and pressed my palms against my eyes. Think, Ivy. Think. That's when I remembered the contract. Not my employment contract. That had been standard boilerplate that gave the company ownership of anything I created. But there had been another document, one I'd insisted on before joining. I pulled open my filing cabinet and dug through folders until I found it. A simple 2-page addendum signed by the previous CEO, by legal, and by me. At the time, it had seemed like standard protection for a cautious newcomer. The company had been small then, eager to hire someone with my skills, willing to accommodate what seemed like a minor request. As I reread it now, my heartbeat quickened. Section 6, Paragraph 4. Any proprietary integration systems developed by the employee shall remain the intellectual property of said employee until formal transfer, which must include 1. A 2-month transition period, and 2. Appropriate compensation for ownership rights, as determined by independent valuation. My hands began to shake, but not from fear. For the first time since hearing Phoebe's cruel dismissal, I felt something else, hope. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through contacts until I found a name I hadn't called in years. Diego Reyes. We'd met at a coding boot camp before I joined the company. He'd gone on to law school instead of tech, specializing in intellectual property. I hesitated, my finger hovering over his name. Was I overreacting? Was this document even valid after all this time? My screen lit up with another message from Leo. Phoebe's freaking out. Something about missing authentication protocols. The demo for the new parent company is bombing. I pressed Diego's number. "Hello?" A groggy voice answered. "Diego? It's Ivy Carter. I need your help with a contract. Right now." There was a pause, then the sound of sheets rustling. "Ivy? It's almost midnight. I know. I'm sorry. But this can't wait until morning. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important." I added, suddenly aware of how desperate I sounded. Hold on. I heard rustling, then the click of a lamp. What kind of contract are we talking about? An IP ownership addendum I signed when I joined my company. I was just fired without notice after building the system that got us acquired. Send it over, Diego said, his voice sharper now, fully awake. And Ivy? Don't contact your former employer until we talk. I took photos of each page and sent them. Then paced my apartment while waiting for Diego to call back. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. This is fascinating, he said without preamble. Did they give you any severance, transition period, ownership compensation? Nothing. Just 20 minutes to clear out my desk. Diego made a sound between a whistle and a laugh. Then they're in breach of this addendum. It's surprisingly well crafted for something you did yourself. I didn't trust them even then, I admitted. The CEO kept changing terms during negotiations. Smart woman. Especially this clause about the authentication protocols requiring your personal key for any major update or data migration. They literally can't fully implement your system without you. I froze. What did you just say? Section 8? Core authentication protocols require originator verification through secure channels established at system creation. That's you, Ivy. You built in a kill switch. I hadn't thought about that protocol in months. When I designed the system architecture, I'd included several layers of security. The deepest one required my personal verification for major structural changes, a precaution against someone accidentally corrupting the database during implementation. I'd almost removed it before launch, but left it in as an extra safeguard. So, what does this mean? I asked. It means they need you more than you need them. The question is, what do you want? What did I want? Revenge seemed too simple a word for the burning in my chest. I wanted recognition. I wanted justice. I wanted Phoebe to feel what I felt standing in that office while everyone watched my humiliation. I need to think, I said finally. Don't wait too long. Based on what you've told me, they're going to realize their mistake very soon. After hanging up, I opened my laptop again and checked my personal email. 3 new messages from Phoebe in the span of an hour. 8:47 p.m. Need access to authentication protocols ASAP. 9:16 p.m. Call me immediately. Critical system issue. And 9:58 p.m. This is unprofessional, Ivy. The board is asking questions. My finger hovered over the delete button when a new email appeared. Not from Phoebe, but from our CEO, Anthony. Ivy, understand there's been a miscommunication. Please call me directly to discuss your position with the company. Urgent. I closed my laptop without responding. For 3 years, I'd answered every urgent message, canceled weekend plans for critical issues, and sacrificed sleep for company emergencies. Tonight, they could wait. I took a hot shower, letting the water wash away the day's humiliation. As steam filled the bathroom, clarity began to cut through my foggy thoughts. I had leverage. I had time. Most importantly, I had nothing left to lose. My phone buzzed again as I toweled off. A text from Leo. Where are you? Phoebe told everyone you sabotaged the system before leaving. Board members are here past midnight. So that was her play. Blame me for her inability to understand the system she claimed to have built. Classic Phoebe, always finding someone else to take the fall. I texted back, interesting theory. What's actually happening? Migration failed. Authentication errors. Parent company reps looking nervous. I smiled for the first time since being fired. Not sabotage, just careful engineering. They're talking about flying you in tomorrow. Phoebe looks like she's about to explode. I didn't respond. Instead, I made myself a cup of tea and stood by my window, looking out at the city lights. My phone continued buzzing with messages I didn't read. For once, I wasn't rushing to solve someone else's problem. Morning came with surprising clarity. I'd slept better than I had in months, despite everything. When I finally checked my phone, I had 17 missed calls and 32 messages. I called Diego first. They've been contacting me, he said immediately. Their legal department tracked me down somehow. What did you tell them? That I represent you now, and all communication needs to go through me. He paused. Ivy, they're desperate. The new parent company is threatening to nullify the acquisition if the system isn't fully operational in 48 hours. 48 hours? I repeated. That's our leverage window. We need to meet. How soon can you get to my office? An hour later, I sat across from Diego in a small but neat office downtown. He'd laid out my contract on the desk between us, key sections highlighted. They're claiming the addendum isn't valid because it wasn't included in subsequent promotion paperwork, he explained. That's ridiculous. My role never fundamentally changed. Diego nodded. They're grasping at straws. Now, let's talk strategy. What exactly do you want out of this? I'd been pondering that question all morning. 3 things, I said finally. Full credit for my work, fair compensation for the system I built, and… I hesitated. And? Diego prompted. And I want Phoebe exposed for what she did. Diego leaned back, studying me. The first 2 are straightforward. The third is trickier. We can't make exposure a legal demand, but we can create circumstances where the truth comes out naturally, I suggested. A slow smile spread across Diego's face. Now you're thinking like a lawyer. Let's draft our response. We spent the next 2 hours crafting a careful message. Not a list of demands, but an invitation to resolve the unfortunate situation in a way that benefited all parties. By the time we finished, the company had called 4 more times. Ready? Diego asked, finger hovering over the send button. I nodded, and with that simple motion, everything was set in motion. The response came within 15 minutes. A request for an immediate meeting with the board, including representatives from the parent company. They offered to send a car. Too eager, Diego murmured. They're panicking. Good, I said. Let's make them wait until tomorrow. Playing hardball? Diego raised an eyebrow. I like it. We scheduled the meeting for 10 a.m. the next day, giving the company another night of uncertainty. Another night for Phoebe to dig herself deeper, trying to fix what she didn't understand. That evening, Leo called instead of texting. They brought in external consultants, he said without greeting. 3 different teams. None of them can get past the authentication blocks. How's Phoebe handling it? I tried to keep my voice neutral. He lowered his voice. She told the board she mentored you through building the entire system, that she designed the architecture and you just executed her vision. My grip tightened on the phone. Did they believe her? At first. But then the consultants started asking technical questions. It got awkward fast. I closed my eyes, picturing the scene. Phoebe stumbling through explanations of systems she'd never bothered to understand, her confidence faltering with each question. There's something else, Leo continued. The parent company rep asked to see all the development documentation with your signatures. Phoebe claimed you never properly documented anything. A harsh laugh escaped me. She said what? Yeah. That's when Anthony looked really concerned. He asked about the repository. Phoebe said, you must have deleted it before leaving. The repository that contained every detail of my work for the past 3 years, every decision, every breakthrough, every late night. The repository she had downloaded before firing me. Leo, I need you to do something for me, I said carefully. Can you check the access logs for the documentation repository? I need to know who accessed it in the past 2 weeks. Already did, he replied, surprising me. That's actually why I'm calling. Phoebe downloaded everything last Friday. I have the logs. My heart raced. Can you forward them to me? Already did that too. Check your personal email. He paused. Ivy, what she did to you was wrong. Most of the team knows it. After we hung up, I forwarded the logs to Diego with a simple message. More ammunition. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I pulled out my old sketchbook and paints, setting up by the window where the city lights provided a perfect backdrop. For hours, I lost myself in colors and shapes, creating something new instead of fixing someone else's problems. By morning, I felt centered in a way I hadn't in years. I chose my outfit carefully, not the standard business attire I'd worn at the company, but a deep green dress that made me feel confident, professional but distinctly me. Diego met me in the lobby of my former office building. Remember? he said quietly as we waited for the elevator. Let me do most of the talking. When you do speak, focus on the technical aspects only. No emotions. I nodded, though containing my emotions would be the hardest part. As the elevator climbed, I silently rehearsed what I would and wouldn't say. The conference room fell silent when we entered. 8 people sat around the table. Anthony, our CEO, 3 board members, 2 representatives from the parent company, a woman I didn't recognize who had legal written all over her crisp suit, and Phoebe. Phoebe's expression flickered between surprise, anger, and something else, fear, before settling into a composed smile. Ivy, thank you for coming in. We have some concerns about the system implementation that Ms. Carter will be addressing the technical aspects shortly. Diego interrupted smoothly. But first, we need to clarify the terms of her involvement. He placed copies of my contract addendum on the table, along with printouts of the repository access logs. As each person reached for the documents, I finally allowed myself to look directly at Phoebe. Our eyes met. And in that moment, I saw the exact instant she realized what was happening. The precise second she understood that her carefully constructed narrative was about to collapse. And I knew exactly what I wanted my revenge to be. The boardroom air felt charged with tension. Anthony cleared his throat, glancing between the contract in his hands and Phoebe's increasingly rigid posture. Before we begin, Diego said, I'd like to establish some facts. Ms. Carter designed and built the integration system that forms the centerpiece of your recent acquisition. According to this addendum, which was properly executed and never superseded, she retains intellectual property rights until specific conditions are met. The company lawyer leaned forward. This addendum was signed 3 years ago under different management. We contend that, if the signatures remain valid, Diego interrupted. The company accepted the benefits of this agreement for years. You can't now claim it doesn't apply simply because it's inconvenient. One of the parent company representatives, a woman with silver-streaked hair and piercing eyes, tapped the access logs. Could someone explain what these show? Before anyone could respond, Phoebe jumped in. Those are standard backup protocols. As project lead, I regularly archived system documentation. I couldn't help myself. At 11:42 p.m. on a Friday, while I was completing the final module, the room fell silent. The silver-haired woman turned to Phoebe. You told us yesterday that Ms. Carter failed to properly document the system. Phoebe's voice faltered. There were gaps in her documentation that I was attempting to fill. Anthony's expression darkened. That directly contradicts what you said in our emergency meeting. You claimed Ivy deleted documentation before leaving. Perhaps I misspoke under pressure, Phoebe said, her smile strained. The important issue is getting the system operational. Indeed, said the silver-haired woman, turning to me. Ms. Carter, can you resolve the authentication issues? All eyes turned to me. This was the moment, my opportunity to explain exactly how Phoebe had betrayed me, how she'd stolen credit, how she'd humiliated me. The words bubbled up in my throat. Diego touched my arm lightly, a silent reminder of our strategy. I took a deep breath. Yes, I can resolve the issues. The authentication protocol requires my biometric verification for major structural changes, a security feature to prevent unauthorized system modifications. That seems... The company lawyer hesitated. Unusual. It's documented in Section 27 of the Architecture Overview, I replied calmly. Which Phoebe approved last year? Phoebe's face flushed. I don't recall that specific you. Page 42, paragraph 3, I continued. Your initials appear in the approval column. The silver-haired woman leaned back, a glimmer of what might have been appreciation in her eyes. How quickly can you implement the necessary fixes, Ms. Carter? Diego stepped in. That depends on the terms of Ms. Carter's re-engagement. As her counsel, I must insist on proper recognition of her intellectual property rights, fair compensation, and appropriate credit for her work. Credit? Phoebe interjected. Ivy was part of my team. Teams don't get individual credit. Interesting perspective, Diego replied, sliding another document across the table. These are press clippings where you discussed your revolutionary system. No mention of teams there. Anthony ran a hand through his hair. Let's focus on solutions. Miss Carter, what would it take to get you back on board immediately? Diego and I exchanged glances. This was proceeding exactly as we'd anticipated. 3 conditions, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. First, proper compensation for my intellectual property. The system currently being implemented. Diego has prepared a fair valuation. Anthony nodded. And second, public acknowledgement of my role as creator and architect of the integration system in all company communications, press releases, and technical documentation going forward. Phoebe made a small noise of protest, but Anthony silenced her with a look. That seems reasonable, given the circumstances. And third, I met Phoebe's eyes directly. I will oversee the implementation personally, as Chief Technology Officer. The room erupted in murmurs. Phoebe stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. That's absurd. I'm the Chief Integration Officer. The system falls under my purview. The system you can't operate, the silver-haired woman said quietly. The system you claim to understand. Anthony looked pained. Phoebe, please sit down. Let's discuss this rationally. Anthony, there's nothing to discuss. Phoebe snapped. She's holding the company hostage. You can't reward that behavior. Diego smiled thinly. Miss Carter isn't holding anyone hostage. She's enforcing her contractual rights after being wrongfully terminated without the transition period her agreement requires. The silver-haired woman turned to Anthony. Our timeline doesn't allow for prolonged negotiations. If Ms. Carter can implement the system as promised, her terms seem reasonable considering the alternative. Anthony nodded slowly. I tend to agree. Ivy, if we meet these conditions, how soon can you begin? Immediately, I replied. The authentication issues can be resolved within hours. Full implementation would take approximately 2 weeks. 2 weeks? Phoebe laughed incredulously. I promised the board 3 days. You promised something you couldn't deliver, I said simply. The second parent company representative, who had been silent until now, leaned forward. Ms. Blake, yesterday you assured us you understood every aspect of this system. Now it appears you can't even access it without Ms. Carter's assistance. Can you explain this discrepancy? Phoebe's composure cracked visibly. I oversaw the entire project. The technical details were delegated, yet you presented yourself as the architect, he pressed. I was speaking in a managerial capacity, she insisted, her voice rising. Ivy worked under my direction. That's not how innovation works, the silver-haired woman said. Direction isn't creation. Anthony cleared his throat. I believe we need to make a decision quickly. I propose we accept Miss Carter's terms, with details to be finalized by end of day. Diego produced a preliminary agreement he'd prepared. We anticipated this outcome. The key terms are outlined here. As papers were passed around, Phoebe tried one last gambit. This is setting a dangerous precedent. What's to stop other employees from holding critical systems hostage? Perhaps, said the silver-haired woman. The precedent we should worry about is taking credit for other people's innovations. The meeting concluded 30 minutes later with a signed agreement. As people filed out, Phoebe lingered, waiting until we were alone in the conference room. You won't succeed, she said, her voice low. You're not a leader, Ivy. You're a coder. You don't have what it takes to navigate the politics at this level. I gathered my papers calmly. You taught me more about politics than you realize. This isn't over, she warned. Actually, it is. I met her gaze steadily. You fired me, Phoebe, in front of everyone, called me worthless. Did you really think there wouldn't be consequences? She opened her mouth to respond, but I was already walking away. The next 2 weeks were among the most challenging of my career. I worked directly with the parent company implementation team, untangling the integration issues that had emerged. True to my word, I resolved the authentication problems within hours. But the full system implementation required meticulous attention. Phoebe attempted to insert herself into the process repeatedly, scheduling unnecessary review meetings and questioning my decisions in front of others. Each time, I responded with technical explanations so thorough that even attempting to follow them made her eyes glaze over. By the end of the first week, the parent company representatives had taken to coming directly to me with questions. By the middle of the second week, Phoebe's meetings were being rescheduled or canceled entirely. The board scheduled a company-wide announcement for Friday afternoon to formally introduce the new organizational structure. As I prepared for the meeting, Leo knocked on my temporary office door. "You did it," he said, grinning. "Everyone's talking about how you saved the acquisition. The system works," I replied modestly. "It just needed the right implementation approach." "It's more than that," Leo insisted. "Phoebe's been telling everyone for months that she designed the architecture. Now, everyone knows the truth." I paused in gathering my notes. "How's she handling that?" Leo's grin widened. "Not well. She tried to take credit for the successful implementation in yesterday's executive meeting. Anthony shut her down immediately. Said something about accurate attribution being essential to company integrity. I couldn't help but smile. Integrity. Imagine that. The company atrium was packed when I arrived for the announcement. Anthony stood at the podium, with board members and parent company executives seated behind him. Phoebe sat at the end of the row, her face a careful mask. "As you know," Anthony began, "the past 2 weeks have seen significant changes in our organization. The integration of our technologies with our new parent company represents an exciting opportunity for growth." And he continued with standard corporate optimism until reaching the personnel announcements. "I'm pleased to introduce our new executive team, who will lead us through this transition and beyond." One by one, executives were called forward, their new titles announced to polite applause. When Phoebe's name was called, I held my breath. Phoebe Blake will be transitioning to our client relations team, where her communication skills will strengthen our customer partnerships. Not fired, but demoted and sidelined. From the tight smile on Phoebe's face as she stood for a moment of awkward applause, this was unexpected news to her as well. "And finally," Anthony continued, "I'm pleased to announce our new Chief Technology Officer, the architect of the integration system that brought us to this momentous juncture, Ivy Carter." The applause that greeted me as I walked to the podium was thunderous. From the development team, I heard actual cheering. As I scanned the crowd, I saw genuine smiles, nods of respect, and more than a few thumbs up from people who had witnessed my humiliation 2 weeks earlier. At the podium, I kept my remarks brief and forward-looking, focusing on the potential of our technology rather than the past. But as I concluded, I couldn't resist one final statement. Success in technology isn't about who speaks the loudest or who can best present an idea, I said, my eyes briefly meeting Phoebe's. It's about innovation, integrity, and the quiet persistence to build something that works exactly as promised. I look forward to leading a team where every contributor is valued for their actual contribution. The pointed message wasn't lost on the crowd. As applause erupted again, I saw Phoebe slip quietly out a side door. Later that evening, as I was packing up my new office, the corner space that had once been Phoebe's, Diego called with news. "The final compensation agreement came through," he said. 6 times your previous salary, plus stock options, and the implementation bonus we negotiated. And the public acknowledgement? The press release went out an hour ago. You're prominently featured as the architect and creator of the system. There's already interest from tech journals for interviews. I sat back in my chair now, and looked out at the city lights. "Thank you, Diego, for everything. You did the hard part," he replied. "You built something so valuable they couldn't ignore you." After hanging up, I pulled out my old company badge, the one Tom, the security guard, had awkwardly taken 2 weeks earlier. I'd found it in my new desk drawer with a sticky note. "Thought you might want this back. T." The photo showed a younger version of me. Hair pulled back severely, expression serious. I hardly recognized that woman now. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Your office looks good on you. Never doubted you'd find your way back. Tom." I smiled and began typing a response when an email notification appeared. From Phoebe, My finger hovered over the delete button, but curiosity won out. I opened it. Ivy, I underestimated you. A mistake I won't repeat. This company isn't big enough for both of us, and I won't be relegated to selling what you build. Enjoy your victory while it lasts. P. I read it twice, then calmly clicked delete. Her threats meant nothing now. The system she'd claimed as her own had exposed her, and her inability to understand what she'd taken credit for had been her undoing. No dramatic confrontation needed, no elaborate scheme, just the elegant justice of truth revealing itself. That was my revenge, not destroying Phoebe, but simply creating space for the truth to emerge. She had destroyed herself by believing she could claim credit for work she didn't understand. I turned off my computer and picked up my bag, ready to head home. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new systems to build, new problems to solve. But tonight, I would sleep soundly, secure in the knowledge that I had reclaimed not just my work, but my worth. As I walked through the quiet office, I passed the empty desk that had been mine 2 weeks ago. The desk where Phoebe had stood over me and declared me worthless. I paused, running my fingers lightly across its surface. Thank you, I whispered to no one in particular, for showing me that the true measure of my value was never in someone else's hands. If you've ever had someone try to diminish your worth or take credit for your hard work, leave a comment below. And if this story of quiet persistence and truth prevailing resonated with you, hit that subscribe button. Because sometimes the most satisfying revenge isn't about bringing someone else down. It's about rising to exactly where you belong.